Chapter 2: New Choices. Filtering out extraneous information is one of the basic functions of consciousness. If everything available to our senses demanded our attention at all times, we wouldn't be able to get through the day. Much of human progress has involved reducing the time and energy as well as the number of processes we have to engage in and think about for each of us to obtain the necessities of life. We moved from foraging and subsistence agriculture to the development of crafts and trade. As cultures advanced, not every individual had to focus every bit of energy every day on filling his belly. One could specialize in certain skills and then trade the products of that skill for other goods. Eons later, manufacturers and merchants made life simpler. Still, individuals could simply purchase food and clothing and household items often until very recently at the same general store. The variety of offerings was meager, but the time spent procuring them was minimal as well. In the past few decades, though, that long process of simplifying and bundling economic offerings has been reversed. Increasingly, the trend moves back toward time-consuming foraging behavior as each of us is forced to sift for ourselves through more and more options in almost every aspect of life. Choosing utilities. A generation ago, all utilities were regulated monopolies. Consumers didn't have to make decisions about who was going to provide telephone or electric service. Then came the breakup of M.A. Bell. What followed in its wake was a set of options that has grown over time into a dizzying array. We face many different possible long distance providers, each offering many different possible plans. We now even face choice among local telephone service providers. And the advent of cell phones has given us the choice of cell phone service providers, multiplying options yet again. I get about 2 solicitations a week from companies that want to help me make my long distance calls, and we are all assaulted daily with broadcast and print advertising. Phone service has become a decision to weigh and contemplate. The same thing has begun to happen with electric power. Companies are now competing for our business in many parts of the country. Again, we are forced to educate ourselves so that the decisions we make will be well informed. I am not suggesting, by the way, that deregulation and competition in the telephone and power industries are bad things. Many experts suggest that in the case of phone service, deregulation brought improved service at lower prices. With electric power, the jury is still out. In some places, the introduction of choice and competition has gone smoothly. In other places, it has been rough with spotty service and increased prices. And most notably in California, it has been a disaster. But even if we assume that the kinks will be worked out eventually and competitive electric power provision will benefit consumers, the fact remains that it is another choice we have to make. In discussing the introduction of electric power competition in New York, Edward Smeloff, a utility industry expert, said, "In the past, we trusted that state regulators who were appointed by our elected officials were watching out for us, which may or may not have been true. The new model is, figure it out for yourself. Is this good news or not?" According to a survey conducted by Yankelovich Partners, a majority of people want more control over the details of their lives, but a majority of people also want to simplify their lives. There you have it, the paradox of our times. As evidence of this conflicted desire, it turns out that many people, though happy about the availability of telephone choices or electric choices, don't really make them. They stick with what they already have without even investigating alternatives. Almost 20 years after phone deregulation, AT&T still has 60% of the market, and half of its customers pay the basic rates. Most folks don't even shop around for calling plans within the company. And in Philadelphia, with the recent arrival of electricity competition, only an estimated 15% of customers shop for better deals. You might think that there is no harm in this, that customers are just making a sensible choice not to worry. But The problem is that state regulators aren't there anymore to make sure consumers don't get ripped off. In an era of deregulation, even if you keep what you have always had, you may end up paying substantially more for the same service. Choosing health insurance. Health insurance is serious business, and the choices we make with respect to it can have devastating consequences. Not too long ago, only one kind of health insurance was available to most people, usually some local version of Blue Cross or a non-profit healthcare provider like Kaiser Permanente, and these companies didn't offer a wide variety of plans to their subscribers. Nowadays, organizations present their employees with options, one or more HMOs or PPOs, and within these plans, there are more options. The level of deductible, the prescription drug plan, dental plan, vision plan, and so on. If consumers are buying their own insurance rather than choosing from what employers provide, even more options are available. Once again, I don't mean to suggest that we can't or don't benefit from these options. Perhaps many of us do, but it presents yet another thing to worry about, to master, or perhaps to get very wrong. In the presidential election of 2000, one of the points of contention between George W. Bush and Al Gore concerned the matter of choice in health insurance. Both candidates supported providing prescription drugs coverage for senior citizens, but they differed dramatically in their views about how best to do that. Gore favored adding prescription drug coverage to Medicare. A panel of experts would determine what the coverage would be, and every senior citizen would have the same plan. Senior citizens would not have to gather information or make decisions. Under the Bush plan, private insurers would come up with a variety of drug plans, and then seniors would choose the plan that best suited their needs. Bush had great confidence in the magic of the competitive market to generate high quality, low cost service. As I write this 3 years later, the positions of Democrats and Republicans haven't changed much, and the issue has yet to be resolved. Perhaps confidence in the market is justified, but even if it is, it shifts the burden of making decisions from the government to the individual. And not only is the health insurance issue incredibly complicated, I think I've met only one person in my entire life who fully understands what his insurance covers and what it doesn't, and what those statements that come from the insurance company really mean. But the stakes are astronomical. A bad decision by a senior citizen can bring complete financial ruin, leading perhaps to choices between food and medicine, just a situation that the prescription drug coverage is intended to prevent. Choosing retirement plans. The variety of pension plans offered to employees present the same difficulty. Over the years, more and more employers have switched from what are called defined benefit pension plans, in which retirees get whatever their years of service and terminal salaries entitle them to defined contribution plans, in which employee and employer each contribute to some investment instrument. What the employee gets at retirement depends on the performance of the investment instrument. With defined contribution plans came choice. Employers might offer a few plans, differing perhaps in how speculative the investments they made were, and employees would choose from among them. Typically, employees could allocate their retirement contributions among plans in pretty much any way they liked and could change their allocations from year to year. What has happened in recent years is that choice among pension plans has exploded. So not only do employees have the opportunity to choose among relatively high and low risk investment, but they now have the opportunity to choose among several candidates in each category. For example, a relative of mine is a partner in a mid-sized accounting firm. The firm had offered its employees 14 different pension options, which could be combined in any way employees wanted. Just this year, several partners decided that this set of choices was inadequate, so they developed a retirement plan that has 156 options. Option number 156 is that employees who don't like the other 155 can design their own. This increase in retirement investment options appears to be beneficial to employees. If you once had a choice between Fund A and Fund B, and now Fund C and Fund D are added, you can always decide to ignore the new choices. Fund C and D will appeal to some, and others won't be hurt by ignoring them. But the problem is that there are a lot of funds, well over 5,000 out there. Which one is just right for you? How do you decide which one to choose when employers are establishing relations with just a few funds? They can rely on the judgments of financial experts to choose those funds in a way that benefits employees. That is, employers can, like the government, be looking over their employees' shoulders to protect them from really bad decisions. As the number of options increases, the work involved in employer oversight goes up. Moreover, I think the adding of options brings with it a subtle shift in the responsibility that employers feel toward their employees. When the employer is providing only a few routes to retirement security, it seems important to take responsibility for the quality of those routes. But when the employer takes the trouble to provide many routes, then it seems reasonable to think that by providing options, the employer has done his or her part. Choosing wisely among those options becomes the employee's responsibility. Just how well do people choose when it comes to their retirement? A study of people actually making decisions about where to put their retirement contributions found that when people are confronted with a large number of options, they typically adopt a strategy of dividing their contributions equally among the options 50-50 if there are two, 25, 25, 25, 25 if there are four, and so on. What this means is that whether employees are making wise decisions depends entirely on the options that are being provided for them by the employer. So an employer might, for example, provide one conservative option and five more speculative ones on the grounds that conservative investments are basically all alike, but that people should be able to choose their own risks. A typical employee putting a sixth of her retirement in each fund might have no idea that she has made an extremely high risk decision, with 83% of her money tied to the perturbations of the stock market. You might think that if people can be so inattentive to something as important as retirement, they deserve what they get. The employer is doing right by them, but they aren't doing right by themselves. There is certainly something to be said for this view, but my point here is that the retirement decision is only one among very many important decisions, and most people may feel that they lack the expertise to make decisions about their money by themselves. Once again, new choices demand more extensive research and create more individual responsibility for failure. Choosing medical care. A few weeks ago, my wife went to a new doctor for her annual physical. She had the checkup and all was well. But as she walked home, she became increasingly upset at how perfunctory the whole exchange had been. No blood work, no breast exam. The doctor had listened to her heart, taken her blood pressure, arranged for a mammogram, and asked her if she had any complaints. That was about it. This didn't seem like an annual physical to my wife, so she called the office to see whether there had been some misunderstanding about the purpose of her visit. She described what had transpired to the office manager, who proceeded to tell her that this doctor's philosophy was to have her examinations guided by the desires of the patient. Aside from a few routine procedures, she had no standard protocol for physical exams. Each was a matter of negotiation between physician and patient. The office manager apologized that the doctor's approach had not been made clear to my wife and suggested a follow-up conversation between my wife and the doctor about checkups will be like in the future. My wife was astonished. Going to the doctor, at least this doctor, was like going to the hairdresser. The client patient has to let the professional know what she wants out of each visit. The patient is in charge. Responsibility for medical care has landed on the shoulders of patients with a resounding thud. I don't mean choice of doctors. We've always had that. If we aren't among the nation's poor and with managed care, we surely have less of it than we had before. I mean, choice about what the doctors do, the tenure of medical practice has shifted from one in which the all knowing paternalistic doctor tells the patient what must be done or just does it, to one in which the doctors arrays the possibilities before the patient, along with the likely pluses and minuses of each, and the patient makes a choice. The attitude was well described by physician and New Yorker contributor Atul Gawande. Only a decade ago, doctors made the decision. Patients did what they were told. Doctors did not consult patients about their desires and priorities and routinely withheld information, sometimes crucial information such as what drugs they were on, what treatments they were being given, and what their diagnosis was. Patients were even forbidden to look at their own medical records. It wasn't their property, doctors say. They were regarded as children, too fragile and simple minded to handle the truth, let alone make decisions, and they suffered for it. They suffered because some doctors were arrogant and or careless. Also, they suffered because sometimes choosing the right course of action was not just a medical decision, but a decision involving other factors in a patient's life. The patient's network of family and friends, for example, under these circumstances, surely the patient should be the one making the decision. According to Gawande, The Silent World of Doctor and Patient by physician and ethicist J. Katz, published in 1984, launched the transformation in medical practice that has brought us where we are today. And Gawande has no doubt that giving patients more responsibility for what their doctors do has greatly improved the quality of medical care they receive. But he also suggests that the shift in responsibility has gone too far. The new orthodoxy about patient autonomy has a hard time acknowledging an awkward truth. Patients frequently don't want the freedom that we've given them. That is, they are glad to have their autonomy respected, but the exercise of that autonomy means being able to relinquish it. Gawande goes on to describe a family medical emergency in which his own newborn daughter, Hunter, stopped breathing. After some vigorous shaking, started the little girl breathing again. Gawande and his wife rushed her to the hospital. His daughter's breathing continued to be extremely labored, and the doctors on duty asked Gawande whether he wanted his daughter intubated. This was a decision that he wanted the doctors, people he had never met before, to make for him. The uncertainties were savage, and I could not bear the possibility of making the wrong call. Even if I made what I was sure was the right choice for her, I could not live with the guilt of something if something went wrong. I needed Hunter's physician to bear the responsibility. They could live with the consequences, good or bad. Gawande's reports that research has shown that patients commonly prefer to have others make their decisions for them, though as many as 65% of people surveyed say that if they were to get cancer, they would want to choose their own treatment. In fact, among people who do get cancer, only 12% actually want to do so. What patients really seem to want from their doctors, Gawande believes, is competence and kindness. Kindness, of course, includes respect for autonomy, but it does not treat autonomy as an inviolable end in itself. When it comes to medical treatment, patients see choice as both a blessing and a burden, and the burden falls primarily on women, who are typically the guardians not only of their own health but that of their husbands and children. It is an overwhelming task for women and consumers in general to be able to sort through the information they find and make decisions, says Amy Alina, Program Director of the National Women's Health Network. And what makes it overwhelming is not only that the decision is ours, but that the number of sources of information from which we are to make the decision has exploded. It is not just a matter of listening to your doctor lay out the options and make a choice. We now have encyclopedic lay people's guides to health, better health, magazines, and most dramatic of all, the internet. So now, the prospect of medical decision has become everyone's worst nightmare of a term paper assignment, with stakes infinitely higher than a grade in a course. And beyond the sources of information about mainstream medical practices to which we can now turn, there is an increasing array of non traditional practices, herbs, vitamins, diets, acupuncture, copper bracelets, and so on. In 1997, Americans spent about $27 billion on non traditional remedies, most of them unproven. Every day, these practices become less and less fringy, more and more regarded as reasonable options to be considered. The combination of decision autonomy and a proliferation of treatment possibilities places an incredible burden on every person in a high stakes area of decision making that did not exist 20 years ago. The latest indication of the shift in responsibility for medical decision from doctor to patient is the widespread of advertising of prescription drugs that exploded onto the scene after various federal restrictions on such ads were lifted in 1997. Ask yourself, what is the point of advertising prescription drugs? Antidepressant, anti-inflammatory, anti-allergy, diet, ulcer, you name it. On primetime television, we can't just go to the drugstore and buy them. The doctor must prescribe them. So why are drug companies investing big money to reach us, the consumers, directly? Clearly, they hope and expect we will notice their products and demand that our doctors write the prescription. The doctors are now merely instruments for the execution of our decision. Choosing beauty. What do you want to look like? Thanks to the options modern surgery provides, we can now transform our bodies and our facial features. In 1999, over a million cosmetic surgical procedures were done on Americans. 230,000 liposuctions, 165,000 breast augmentations, 140,000 eyelid surgeries, 73,000 facelifts, and 55,000 tummy tucks. Though it is mostly 89% women who avail themselves of these procedures, men do it too. We think of it like getting your nail done or going to a spa, says a spokesman for the American Society of Plastic Surgeons. Another says that going under the knife is no different from putting a nice sweater on, or combing your hair, or doing your nails, or having a little tan. In other words, cosmetic surgery is slowly shifting from being a procedure that people gossip about to being a commonplace tool for self improvement. To the extent that this is true, fundamental aspects of appearance become a matter of choice. How people look is yet another thing that they are now responsible for deciding for themselves. As journalist Wendy Kaminer puts it, beauty used to be a gift bestowed upon the few for the rest of us to admire. Today it's an achievement, and homeliness is not just misfortune but a failure. Choosing how to work. Throughout, throughout its history, the United States has taken pride in the social mobility afforded to its citizens, and justly so. Some two-thirds of American high school graduates attend college. A degree then opens up a wide variety of employment opportunities. What kind of work Americans choose to do is remarkably unconstrained either by what their parents did before them or by what kind of work is available where they grew up. I know that employment prospects and possibilities are not equally available to everyone in America. Family finances and national economic trends impose serious constraints on many, but not as many as in the past. After people choose a career path, new choices face them. The telecommunications revolution has created enormous flexibility about when and where many people can work. Companies are slowly, if reluctantly, accepting the idea that many people can do their jobs productively from home, spared interruptions and unnecessary oversight. And once people are in the position to be able to work at any time from any place, they face decisions every minute. They face decisions every minute of every day about whether or not to be working. Email is just a modern way. Should we check it before we go to bed? Should we bring our laptop along on our vacation? Should we dial into the office voicemail system with our cell phone and check for messages while waiting between courses at the restaurant? For people in many occupations, there are few obstacles standing in the way of working all the time. And this means that whether or not we work has become a matter of hour by hour, minute by minute choice. And whom do we work for? Here too, it seems that every day we face a choice. The average American 32-year-old has already worked for 9 different companies. In an article a few years ago about the increasingly peripatetic American workforce, U.S. News and World Report estimated that 17 million Americans would voluntarily leave their jobs in 1999 to take other employment. People switch jobs to get big raises and to pursue opportunities for advancement. They switch jobs because they want to live in a different city. They switch jobs because they are bored. Indeed, job switching has become so natural that individuals who have worked for the same employer for 5 years are regarded with suspicion. No longer are they seen as loyal, instead their desirability or ambition is called into question. At least when times are good and jobs are plentiful. When times are harder as they are right now, there will obviously be much less job switching than there was in 1999, but people will still be looking. When should you start looking for a new job? The answer seems to be that you start looking the day you begin your current job. Think for a moment about what this means to each of us as decision makers. It means that the question, why should I work? And what kind of work should I do? Are never resolved. Nothing is ever settled. The antenna for new and better opportunities are always active. The Microsoft ad that asks us, where do you want to go today, is not just about web surfing. This kind of job mobility offers many opportunities. Being able to move around, changing employers, and even careers opens doors to challenging and fulfilling options. But it comes at a price, and the price is the daily burden of gathering information and making decisions. People can never relax and enjoy what they have already achieved at all times. They have to stay alert for the next big chance. Even how we dress for work has taken on a new element of choice, and with it, new anxieties. The practice of having a dress down day or casual day, which began to emerge a decade or so ago, was intended to make life easier for employees, to enable them to save money and feel more relaxed at the office. The effect, however, was just the reverse. In addition to the normal workplace wardrobe, the employees had to create a workplace casual wardrobe. It couldn't really be the sweats and t-shirts you wore around the house on the weekend. It had to be a selection of clothing that sustained a certain image, relaxed but also meticulous and serious. All of a sudden, the range of wardrobe possibilities was expanded, and a decision-making problem emerged. It was no longer a question of the blue suit or the brown one, the red tie or the yellow one. The question now was, what is casual? A New Yorker piece about this phenomenon identified at least 6 different kinds of casual: active casual, rugged casual, sporty casual, dressy casual, smart casual, and business casual. As writer John Seabrook put it, this may be the most depressing thing about casual movement. No clothing is casual anymore. So we got the freedom to make an individual choice about how to dress on a given day, but for many, that choice entailed more complication than it was worth. Choosing how to laugh. I have a former student, let's call him Joseph, with whom I've remained close since he graduated from college in the early 90s. He went on to earn a PhD and currently works as a researcher at a major university. A few years ago, Joseph and a fellow graduate student, let's call her Jane, fell in love. This is it, Joseph assured me. There was no doubt in anyone's mind. With his career on track and a life partner selected, it might appear that Joseph had made the big decisions. Yet, in the course of their courtship, Joseph and Jane had to make a series of tough choices. First, they had to decide whether to live together. This decision involved weighing the virtues of independence against the virtues of interdependence, and measuring various practical advantages, convenience, financial savings of living together against possible parental disapproval. A short time later, they had to decide when and how to get married. Should they wait until their respective careers were more settled or not? Should they have a religious ceremony? And if so, would it be his religion or hers? Then, having decided to marry, Joseph and Jane had to decide if they should merge their finances or keep them separate, and if separate, how they should handle joint expenses. With marital decisions settled, they next had to face the dilemma of children. Should they have them? Yes, they easily decided. However, the question of timing led to another series of choices involving ticking biological clocks, the demands of finishing PhDs, and uncertainty about future employment circumstances. They also had to resolve the question of religion. Were they going to give their kids a religious upbringing, and if so, in whose religion? Next came a series of career related choices. Should they each look for the best possible job and be open to the possibility that they might have to live apart for some time? If not, whose career should get priority in looking for jobs? Should they restrict their search to be near his West Coast family or her East Coast family? Or should they ignore geography completely and just look for the best jobs they could find in the same city? Wherever it was, facing and resolving each of these decisions, all with potentially significant consequences, was difficult for Joseph and his Jane. They thought that they had already made the hard decisions when they fell in love and made a mutual commitment. Shouldn't that be enough? A range of life choices has been available to Americans for quite some time, but in the past, the default options were so powerful and dominant that few perceived themselves to be making choices. Whom we married was a matter of choice, but we knew that we would do it as soon as we could and have children because that was something all people did. The anomalous few who departed because from this pattern were seen as social renegades, subjects of gossip and speculation. These days, it's hard to figure out what kind of romantic choice, imaginable arrangements of intimate relations. These days, it's hard to figure out what kind of romantic choice would warrant such attention. Wherever we look, we see almost every imaginable arrangement of intimate relations, though unorthodox romantic choices are still greeted with opprobrium. opprobrium. Or much worse in many parts of the world, and in some parts of the world, or United States. It seems clear that the general trend is toward ever greeting tolerance of romantic diversity. Even on network television, hardly the vanguard of social evolution, there are people who are married, unmarried, remarried, heterosexual, and homosexual, childless families, and families with lots of kids, all trying each week to make us laugh. Today, all romantic possibilities are on the table. All choices are real, which is another explosion of freedom, but which is also another set of choices to occupy our attention and fuel our anxiety. Choosing how to pray. Even though most Americans seem to lead thoroughly secular lives, the nation as a whole professes to be deeply religious. According to a recent Gallup poll, 96% of Americans believe in God or a universal spirit, and 87% claim that religion is at least fairly important in their own lives, though only a small fraction of this 90+% of Americans participate regularly in religious activities as part of communities of faith. There is no doubt that we are a nation of believers, but believers in what? Whereas most of us inherit the religious affiliations of our parents, we are remarkably free to choose exactly the flavor of that affiliation that suits us. We are unwilling to regard religious teaching as commandments about which we have no choice, rather than suggestions about which we are the ultimate arbiters. We look upon participation in a religious community as an opportunity to choose just the form of community that gives us what we want out of religion. Some of us may be seeking emotional fulfillment, some may be seeking social connection, some may be seeking ethical guidance and assistance with specific problems in our lives. Religious institutions then become a kind of market for comfort, tranquility, spirituality, and ethical reflection. And we religion consumers shop in that market until we find what we like. It may seem odd to talk about religious institution in these kinds of shopping mall terms, but I think such description reflect what many people want and expect from their religious activities and affiliations. This is not surprising given the dominance of individual choice and personal satisfaction as values in our culture. Even when people join communities of faith and expect to participate in the life of those communities and embrace at least some of the practices of those communities, they simultaneously expect the communities to be responsive to their needs, their tastes, and their desires. Sociologist Alan Wolf recently documented this change in people's orientation to religious institution and teachings in the book Moral Freedom: The Search for Virtue in a World of Choice. Wolf conducted in-depth interviews with a wide variety of people scattered throughout the US, and what he found was near unanimity that it was up to each person as an individual to pick her or his own values and make her or his own moral choices. For people who have experienced religion more as a source of oppression than of comfort, guidance and support, freedom of choice in this area is surely a blessing. They can elect the denomination that is most compatible with their view of life, then select the particular institution that they feel best embodies that view. They can pick and choose from among the practices and teachings those that seem to suit them best, including paradoxically the choice of conservative denominations that are attractive in part because they limit the choices people face in other parts of their lives. On the positive side, an individual can experience a personal form of participation consistent with his or her lifestyle, values, and goals. The negative is the burden of deciding which institution to join and which practices to observe. Choosing who to be. We have another kind of freedom of choice in modern society that is surely unprecedented. We can choose our identities. Each person comes into the world with baggage from his ancestral past. Race, ethnicity, nationality, religion, social and economic class. All this baggage tells the world a lot about who you are, or at least it used to. It need not anymore. Now greater possibility exists for transcending inherited social and economic class. Some of us manage to cast off the religion into which we were born. We can choose to repudiate or embrace our ethnic heritage. We can celebrate or suppress our nationality and even race. That great saw of American history has become more fluid as multiracial marriages become more common. The offspring of those marriages display a variety of hues and physical features that make racial identification from the outside more difficult. And as society becomes more tolerant, it permits racial identification from the inside to be more flexible. Furthermore, because most of us possess multiple identities, we can highlight different ones in different contexts. The young New York immigrant woman from Mexico sitting in a college class in contemporary literature can ask herself, as class discussion of a novel begins, whether she's going to express her identity as the Latina, the Mexican, the woman, the immigrant, or the teenager as class discussion unfolds. I can be an American who happens to be Jewish on my job, and a Jew who happens to be American in my synagogue. Identity is much less a thing people inherit than it used to be. Amartya Sen has pointed out that people have always had the power to choose identity. It has always been possible to say no to aspects of an identity that are thrust upon us, even if the consequences are severe. But, as with marriage, choice of identity has been moving from a state in which the default option was extremely powerful, and the fact of choice had little psychological reality, to a state in which choice is very real and salient. As with all the issues, even I've been discussing in this chapter, this change in the status of personal identity is both good and bad news. Good news because it liberates us, and bad news because it burdens us with the responsibility of choice. What it means to choose. Novelist and existentialist philosopher Albert Camus posed the question, should I kill myself or have a cup of coffee? His point was that everything in life is choice. Every second of every day, we are choosing, and there are always alternatives. Existence, at least human existence, is defined by the choices people make. If that's true, then what can it mean to suggest, as I have in these first two chapters, that we face more choices and more decisions today than ever before? Think about what you did when you wake up in the morning. You get out of your bed, you stagger to the bathroom, you brush your teeth, you take a shower. We can break things down still further. You remove the toothbrush from its holder, you open the toothpaste tube, you squeeze toothpaste onto the brush, and so on. Each and every part of this boring morning ritual is a matter of choice. You don't have to brush your teeth, you don't have to take a shower. When you dress, you don't have to wear underwear. So even before your eyes are more than half open, long before you've had your first cup of coffee, you made a dozen choices or more. But they don't count, really, as choices. You could have done otherwise, but you never gave it a thought. So deeply ingrained, so habitual, so automatic are these morning activities that you don't really contemplate the alternatives. So, though it is logically true that you could have done otherwise, there is little psychological reality to this freedom of choice. On the weekend, perhaps, things are different. You might lie in bed asking whether you're bothered to shower now or wait till later. You might consider passing up your morning shave as well, but during the week, you are an automaton. This is a very good thing. The burden of having every activity be a matter of deliberate and conscious choice will be too much for any of us to bear. The transformation of choice in modern life is that choice in many facets of life has gone from implicit and often psychologically unreal to explicit and psychologically very real. So we now face a demand to make choices that is unparalleled in human history. We probably would be deeply resentful if someone tried to take our freedom of choice away in any part of life that we really cared about and really knew something about. If it were up to us to choose whether or not to have choice, we would opt for choice almost every time. But it is the cumulative effect of these added choices that I think is causing substantial distress. As I mentioned in chapter 1, we are trapped in what Fred Harsh called the tyranny of small decisions. In any given domain, we say a resounding yes to choice, but we never cast a vote on the whole package of choices. Nonetheless, by voting yes in every particular situation, we are in effect voting yes on the package, with the consequence that we are left feeling barely able to manage. In the pages that follow, we will begin to look at some of the ways we can ease what burden and thereby lessen the stress and dissatisfaction that comes with it.